Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our spooktacular episode of Drinks and Dave. Dave, did you unlock the lounge? Because I'm not seeing a whole bunch of people in there.
I don't. I like it a little quiet.
Oh, okay. So
I thought we could just relax, chill out. Maybe we could play some lounge music, maybe some spa music, and just.
There you go, and just kind of zen, just kind of zen out. So, how you doing? How was your week?
It's Tuesday. I mean, it's been short, Dave.
No, I mean,
you know what's weird? Yeah,
no, it's been 7 days since our last show.
Since our last show. Well, then since then, it's been great. It's my wife's birthday is today.
Happy birthday! Actually. Happy birthday to you.
Yeah, so
we're gonna have to sing to her if she shows up.
Oh Lord, but yeah, so we went to Vegas to see Adele this weekend. That was amazing. Saw one of the occasional Barflies there Friday for dinner, so that was fun. And his wife hung out. It's freaking cold here now.
Oh,
it was hot on Sunday. Let's see who I got to switch over to our
I was going to say, Rich is here. Yeah.
Major Rich, good to see you. As always. And Tig Lily, I'm glad to have you here. You've got a flame thingy on your porch, right?
I beg your pardon. Oh yes, a fire table.
Pit.
Yeah, fire pit.
But yours has glass rocks and stuff, right? Is that right?
Well, I had just the glass rocks, and you accused me of being girly, so I went out and bought some lava rocks, and so now we have the teal marble fire rocks and the lava rocks.
So I think that's San Jose Sharks colors, teal and black. So
yeah,
I appreciate your support.
Well, I tried to find orange ones, but Steve had bought them all and dumped them in the end of the ocean.
Yeah. So I think I asked you this once before. Do you ever put stuff in there to create like a nice scent or anything?
I didn't know you could do that.
Well, so I do two things. One is a little bit odd, but I'll tell you, if you try it, you might be hooked on it. Okay. So when I have a cigar and you got your butt or whatever you want to call it, the leftover,
the nub,
I keep those because you put one in to the fire pit every now and again, and it doesn't smell like a cigar. But if you kind of like that tobacco scent and stuff, it gives you just a little hint of it, right? So that's one thing I like. But the other thing, I'm looking around on the deck, and it's now starting to be, I guess, fall here, as much fall as we get, but there's dried leaves all over. That's a winner. You throw some dried leaves on there and you get that burning leaf smell. Oh, I love that.
Somehow I think the fire marshal might have an issue with that, but maybe not.
No, I mean, I'm just 4 or 5 little leaves from time to time. So I'm thinking about upping my game. I might get like a big metal trash can to collect the leaves and keep them throughout the year.
But here's the only thing I think of. So you've got lava rock in yours, right?
Yeah.
So what cleans out the ashes?
It's just, yeah, so the cigars, they burn together. So you can just pick up the ash and toss that. And then the leaves are small enough, they blow away.
I guess you could.
Anyway.
Do that. So what are you smoking tonight, by the way?
Well, nothing. So yeah, at a cigar, a pre-show cigar. I thought, I got time. I'll have 2 short ones, like one before, one after the show. And I started feeling just a little bit off. And if anybody's ever experienced, I guess they call it nicotine sickness or overdose, whatever it is.
The greenies, yes.
Right, which can happen if you have an empty stomach or all. Yeah, I felt a little green. So I've got a Rin, though.
So what are you drinking?
I've got a Rin, Cactus Rin. I'm trying to Aaron single malt barrel reserve.
Nice. Well, first, we've got a new barfly in the bar. Goth GF, thank you so much for joining us. I would be willing to bet that's a friend of KJ and Amber's. I would be willing to bet that, because we're not known as Drinks and Dave's Goth very much, so I doubt that's it. Also, P-Beat is drinking Jack-o'-lantern margarita and lime juice with some Cointreau. I am having a Perdomo Lot 23 Esteli cigar, and I'm drinking coffee. And I know, this is Drinks and Dave's. Why am I not drinking alcohol? Because this really cool mug that a friend of mine from San Francisco, who you might know as the Walrus, sent this to me.
I don't know about that.
So
All
shall we
right, so
let's tell the barflies. Well, go ahead.
well, I was gonna say we're doing the Halloween episode early, and that can be explained when our guests come in. But it's supposed to be ghost, paranormal, all that stuff. So before we switch over to them, I'm curious, have you had any odd
Actually,
experiences or
actually, yes. On this property that we own, we were sitting in our house one day, and through the speakers, out of nowhere, and my mom was still alive at the time. She was here. Sharon was here, and out of one of our speakers, we heard "hello." It was the weirdest thing in the world. We looked outside, nothing's there. And I think it happened twice. And then there's been times, when you, especially out here, out in the weeds, where you'll walk out, and our driveway is about 300 feet to our gate, and there's mesquite trees everywhere, and you'll be like taking out the garbage in the evening, and you'll swear something is looking at you. And a lot of times you'll shine a flashlight, and it'll be a raccoon, or more than often, it's usually a great horned owl. But you know that there's something watching you. And so, yeah, the desert can be a little creepy at night. How about you?
that's creepy in the sense of like being in the ocean, right? And not knowing what's underneath you, and you start imagining what
Well, I mean,
is just gonna.
we've had, I think, and I think anybody who has pets, and I'm sure KJ and Amber will expand on that, is that every once in a while you'll see one of your animals just look straight up at nothing, and you think, okay, there's a spider, there's a cobweb, but then they start chirping like cats. They'll chirp, and you're like, what are you seeing? And they're staring at something. I don't know what it is, but they're staring at something. And so we've seen shadows, people get something out of the corner of their eye. So do I believe that there are spirits walking among us? Yeah, I do. Right. I think.
Well, who'd be good to ask about that?
That's right. I think.
Hey,
we should add, there they are, KJ and Amber from Kilher Spider Paranormal. Welcome, guys. Thank you for showing up.
So you might recognize one of these two from a previous episode. So we have two first. We've got the first return guest,
yes,
and the first female guest, I think, ever on our show.
Yes.
So welcome to both of you.
And and these are truly Renaissance people for sure. So I guess the first question right out of the gate would be, what got you interested in ghosts, paranormal? I mean, aside from those of us that know you, we know that you have a love for Halloween and everything else. So explain that a little bit to us.
Right. So we've both had experiences like before we got together. Actually, do you want to talk about like your first experiences with it?
Well, my first experiences from when I was a child. I lived in Wyoming, F.E. Warren Air Force Base, when I was 5 years old. So that is one of the only Air Force bases that actually have a cemetery or graveyard. I always forget the proper definition. But our house was
dead
actually
people
close to it. And when I was a kid, I just always like certain noises would happen, doors would move a certain way. And I get I was young, but you can't overtake that like eerily something's different in this room feeling. And that's where it all started for me from when I was like 5 years old.
Oh, wow.
And so oddly enough, her experiences were at F.E. Warren Air Force Base. My first experiences were also at F.E. Warren Air Force Base. I was there about 12 to 15 years after she was, and I was stationed there. And it's well known that F.E. Warren, which is an old Army fort that was converted into an Air Force base, many of the officer housing is these old historic brick homes that are
colonial.
Over 100 years old, old horse barns and things like that. And there's just a lot of experiences that happen there. And I had one in my own house there where we were babysitting my ex's and mine's godchild. And she was about 2 years old, maybe even younger than that. I don't she wasn't really talking. But it was a 2-story house, and there was like a landing that kind of took a 90-degree up to the upper floor with a balcony. And we were just sitting there talking. She was playing at the bottom of the steps, and all of a sudden she just dead in her tracks, just looked upstairs, stopped everything she was doing, and intently stared at the top of the stairs. And, you know, they always say that like animals and kids, you know, have different senses than we do, or, you know, they're more open to it, or they're not as jaded as we are, and they're just able to see things that maybe we have put out of our brain of being able to see. And we looked at her and we're like, she is 100% looking at something. And she had a couple of experiences in the house where she just went downstairs and thought that she felt something. But that was like the one thing that I saw that I'm like, okay, something's going on here. And so we both kind of had like little experiences like that early on. And I knew she had gone to the Lemp Mansion, which is over by St. Louis, before we met, and had done a little bit of ghost hunting and saw some things there. And I had gone on one of my deployments this was after Diego, right? When I went to Diego Garcia. So I was there for like 5 weeks. And when I got back, I wanted to do something kind of special for her. And I was looking into a lot of these ghost hunts where you can pay a tour group and do like an overnight haunt at a location. And so I found one and we went on it and we had a great time. And then a couple weeks after that, the lady who was running it contacted me. She thought that I had talked to her about wanting to get more involved, which it wasn't me she was talking to. It was somebody else. But I'm like, well, that wasn't me, but it sounds really cool. So she invited me to help her on her next investigation. And she wasn't able to, it was like on a Friday. She wasn't able to go because she had work. And then I went with them on Friday. And then they had another one the very next day on Saturday, which we both went to. And so we were leading a group through this haunted location. And it was only like the second time that I had ever been on anything like this. But she's like, I can tell you everything you need to know about the equipment and like how to do things. And all you have to do is lead the group through. And I'm kind of just pretty good with people and talking to groups. So I got my way through it. And then after that, like she invited us to a few other things that we led through. And after that, it just became really fun and interesting to go see all these different locations and try to see what we could dig up.
Well, I would imagine from a historical perspective, too, to be able to go through some of these older houses. And before we get to the meats and potatoes, just want to remind everybody in the lounge, type your questions and your ghost stories, whatever you think you have, whether you believe, whether you not believe, because, you know, it's a very polarizing subject. Some people believe, some people think that it's the departed and it's a faith-based thing. Some people go down the road of demonic type stuff. And real quick, I want to ask Dave, I want to share two things first and then ask Dave if he's had any experience. But the one experience I forgot is of my parents. Now in Puerto Rico, when you live up in the mountains where my mom was from, there is this legend called El Hacho. And what El Hacho was is that somehow this guy was down fishing at a creek and he lost his head. Don't know how, but apparently he did. And so El Hacho is if you go down after dark into these little creeks in the rainforest up in Puerto Rico, you'll see this light like a lantern. And you'll just see this lantern going along the creek. And if you go down there, the lantern will turn and come towards you. And my mom spoke of that throughout her entire life. So it's been around for at least 150, 200 years down in Puerto Rico. So that's one. The second one, my parents moved to Danville, West Virginia, and they lived in this old colonial house. And the bathroom was right at the top of the stairs. And on a Sunday morning or other, my dad's in there doing his constitutional, reading the newspaper, and he lowers the newspaper and he swears, God rest his soul. He told us this story that he looked up and there was a Confederate soldier standing there looking at him. And from what my mom relates this story is my dad's voice was never that high pitched ever again. And he said that he evacuated himself really cleanly that day. So, how about you, Dave? Have you had any type of?
I have to say I haven't had any, at least that I remember, anything like that. So that kind of leads me, like you, Dave, you were mentioning, the difference between, the kind of hoaxer seance type people, and then maybe what we're talking about today. So that's my first question to like Amber and KJ is, I don't know really much about this. So I assume that there's lots of different beliefs, um, and maybe different groups of people that believe different things, or is there kind of a general understanding that anybody that's kind of into the paranormal or believe that there's, spirits or what have you, there's a general understanding, or is it just kind of all over the place?
There's a lot of different theories out there about what spirits are, what the energies are, where they come from. And so, yeah, there's any number of things of being like spiritual, just being a residual energy, energies trapped in rocks and minerals. They
I will say, I think there's really two groups of people that go to do ghost hunts. One group is the people that feel it, that you always feel the energy, you feel something there that maybe you can't explain. The second one is the people that want to know. So those are usually the people that like believe in Bigfoot, believe in UFOs. They want to get to the bottom of an answer. And it's kind of like those two groups of people really started ghost hunting.
And that kind of describes us, actually, because she's definitely more in tune. When we will go to a location and she will go into a room and say, I feel something. Like, not like to the level of like a medium necessarily, but she'll just feel an energy. And it can be a positive energy or negative energy, but she'll just feel it. And I won't necessarily feel it. I have at certain times, but I won't usually go into a room and necessarily feel something. But I definitely, want to get in there and see if there's anything that I can discover with various equipments and procedures to try to get some proof.
Well, and I think what you're saying, brings up because the paranormal realm, whether whatever you believe in, is not something that's just like what Dave was saying. Your hoaxsters and stuff like that. I mean, you have parapsychologists; these are doctors that are doing this. You've got the Catholic Church that has the rites of exorcism. I mean, this goes back thousands and thousands of years. So I think there's that crossover, which I find interesting, and I'm probably of what Amber said, probably right in the middle, because I have somebody very close to me who I feel is very, I don't want to use the word psychic because that always brings that weird connotation in it, but this person can tell you something that's going to happen before it happens and be right 90% of the time. Dave, do you have anything before we take some questions from?
No, in fact, I was going to bring up the first one is because I've heard this too, is that, to Tigglow's question, most things like Memorex or their active entity interacting with you, because I've heard that, and maybe kind of what we've heard about the image or the replaying of the movement of the lantern, that type of a thing. So is your thought that it's just something stuck in time, or is it more, or maybe it can be both?
I definitely think that's both. I think there's what they call an intelligent haunting and a residual haunting. So two different things. An intelligent haunting would be either a trapped spirit or maybe just a spirit that wants to come back and be around. Like, you can do some experiments where you can ask questions and have certain pieces of equipment respond or light up in answer to what you're asking. So that is a intelligent response to what you're asking. The other part, and I was alluding to this before, there's something called a stone tape theory. And like Memorex in the question, that is a old cassette tape. Well, what's in there? There's metals and minerals in there that are actually holding that information, like a CD. It's digitally holding that information into something that's inanimate, but it's there. And there's a theory that, and maybe like a big calamity or something extreme that happened. Well, there was a lot of go ahead.
Gettysburg. Has anybody ever been to Gettysburg? You can just feel it.
You can feel the pressure. Yeah.
And then when you get into sort of like battlefields, you can really get like, it's intense. Like, it's so,
Bighorn. Yeah. Bighorn is that way. So
Matt,
so those high energy traumatic events can leave energy in an area, and depending on the mineral content in the ground, in the surrounding rocks, in the bricks, if it's a stone building, can hold on to that energy. And if you think of it like a piece of electronics, you have to add energy to it to produce something. So maybe the surrounding atmospheric energies build and build and build, and all of a sudden it gets to a point where it almost projects that energy and
So it's like
feeling back out.
It's like a capacitor that releases its energy, basically.
Yes, exactly.
Real quick, I want to tell Matt. Matt, we're going to get to your question about who would we haunt. We'll save that for a little bit later. But we were talking about equipment, and I think, about residual versus active. If you want to go into a little bit of the equipment that you guys use, because I know on the TV shows and stuff like that, we hear REM pods, we hear this, we hear that, and most of us just kind of say, oh, yeah, the blinky flashy thingy. But so what are the types of things that you guys use?
So the idea behind most of the equipment is the fact that in order for a spirit to interact with us, it has to have energy. So it's made of energy, or it's borrowing energy from the environment in order to produce an effect, to interact with a piece of equipment. And you can think of it just like maybe just a buildup of like static electricity or something like that. So if you've got something very simple like the K2 meter, which is something that you see on almost every single show, is one of the most basic pieces of equipment. It just has a series of flashy lights, and as you interact with different pieces of equipment, see, as I'm getting it closer to my computer, the lights are going off and getting stronger because it's sensing the electromagnetic radiation that is involved with my computer. So
with that being the case, KJ, with that piece of equipment right there, so you have to be really careful when you guys are investigating of having some historical knowledge on the building, what wiring is in the building, if there's anything still positively charged, because that can affect all of that in your investigation, correct?
Right. And so a lot of people use these like they're a ghost detector. And the more you use them and the more you get involved with it, you realize it's really not. But what it really is good for is debunking. So when you first go into a room, you do a sweep with this and you see, okay, where in this room am I picking up electromagnetic radiation? Where in the walls am I sensing wiring? And also, like anyone's cell phone, if it's sending and receiving a message, walkie-talkies, anything like that can interfere with these and actually give you a false positive. So if you're doing an investigation, you got to make sure, hey, everybody turn your phones off, put them on airplane mode, because we don't want any of those signals interacting with our equipment. So this is actually, some people do use it as like just set it on the table, because if you just set it on the table and nothing else is going around, maybe something's going to interact. But if you're just walking around with it, trying to detect ghosts with it, that's not what it's for. And some people use it that way, but that's not really what it's meant to do. But it is good just to kind of get a feel for the energies in the room, to kind of see what you're entering arguments are before you begin your investigation. Amber will show you this piece of equipment.
Well, both of mine. So my two favorite ones are just motion sensors. And that way, if you actually do get a feeling and then this goes off at the same time, that's what I go off of. So
that is an owl. That is an owl, correct?
Yeah. Okay. So there's something in the community called a paranormal music box. And the original one was built, it looks like a little coffin, and there's just one of these photo sensors on it. So this is just a motion sensor. And
that's my favorite.
This one is loud and annoying. Maybe.
It'll go off.
Yeah, that's piercing my ears.
Well, I think it has to reset. But if it senses motion, this is meant to like scare cats and stuff away from your garden. Because the paranormal music box is $400. This, which uses the exact same sensor, is $20.
There you go.
It's not as cool. It doesn't have the wow factor, but it works exactly the same way. So I can set this up in a hallway and point it, and we can be in another room. There we go. So it flashes.
Heck, that would be enough to scare me out of a haunted house right out of the gate.
Right. So another thing, you mentioned the REM pods. Again, a REM pod is like $200 to $300 because it was built just for ghost hunting. But I built this little thing that works exactly like a REM pod, and all the pieces put together, I probably spent $20 making this. So I got a little on-off switch. What this is actually a doorknob alarm. It had a cable. It had a cable that you would hang on a doorknob. And if you had a hotel room, if somebody grabbed the outside of the doorknob, this would go off. Well, I removed that cable and put an antenna on it. And this is how a REM pod works. It's putting out an electromagnetic field. And when you interact with that field, the alarm goes off. I put a little light on there to show that. I put a little knob on the back that I can adjust the volume, and it just goes off whenever you get near it. So
that's all a REM pod does. That's all it does.
Right.
REM pods do this, and it also has a temperature sensor, and that's it.
So
Okay,
KJ, you mentioned once that like when Amber feels something, then you want to go into the room and see if you can sense something with your equipment, right?
So yeah, like we'll always do a walkthrough first. The first time you go into a location, you do a walkthrough. You go into all the rooms, you see if you can feel anything, or even if you don't, maybe just do you have a feeling like, hey, maybe we should start in this room. So that just kind of gives you a place to start. And if she feels something, we're like, hey, she really felt something in this room. We're going to start there. Then we'll go into that room. We'll set up equipment, and we'll do some experiments from there.
That's pretty cool.
Well, I was going to ask what kind of experiments, because everything you used right there was interacting with you guys, right?
Well, the theory is the energy from the ghost can do the same thing. So if they are using energy, they will interact with those electromagnetic fields the same way.
But this one doesn't interact with us.
Yeah, so this is one of our absolute favorite devices for paranormal. And
what, drinking Crown Royal before you go in? Yeah, getting drunk before you go in?
You got to drink it first before you're ready. But this is my ball sack. Because
those of you that are listening on YouTube, he is not mentioning his male genitalia. He is talking about something paranormal. Thank you.
This is full of cat balls, which are cat toys. And they are meant for if the, you turn it on, it flashes. The cat's going to react to the LED lights, swat it, it goes off again. So if you turn this on and set it down, this light will shut off after about 7 seconds. And then there's just this little...
It's a motion.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So there's a little teeny switch inside that's very sensitive to touch. And as soon as you touch it, that switch connects. And that will make the lights go off again. Well, they're so close and so sensitive that electromagnetic energy can actually make that connection in that switch. So one of our favorite things to do is to get like a trigger object. So that can be something like a doll or a Nurse Dave Shaving World deck of cards, anything that you think whatever spirit is there might want to interact with. So if you're dealing with a child spirit, maybe you've got a doll, or maybe you've got like a little Matchbox car. If you think you're dealing with like an Old West saloon, then you do some whiskey cards or a cigar.
Well, the cards would be for some like swap meet guy who said, "Oh yeah,
So you basically set this up in the room and you walk away and you ask questions and you say, "Hey, are you interested in poker? Do you want to touch the deck of cards?" And you're nowhere near this. And sometimes when you ask those questions, you can actually get that piece of equipment to light up on that trigger object.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Well, and this must have been fortuitous because our good friend and guest, Tim from Cigars Daily, he was on his show last night. And what's funny is you called those your cat balls. Well, his wife's nickname for him is Kitten Balls. So this was fortuitous. See, this is how the paranormal works. Let me ask you one other piece of equipment that I see on some of these shows, like Zach's show and stuff like that, is this thing that shoots out. It looks like a matrix of dots.
Grid.
and then when they're walking in it, they can see on a screen where they get an anomaly that looks like a stick person. Is that just showy, or is there some scientific basis behind that?
Honestly, okay, so that's from the Xbox 360, which came out in 08, 06, or 08 technology that they're putting onto an Android system.
And also the Kinect.
That's the Xbox 360 Connect.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, maybe I didn't say Connect.
Uh-huh.
But this is also now 20-year-old technology that's on computer basis, written in a code that's not made for the other code to read. I don't put any
Credence in any of that?
at all.
Now, is there any other equipment that you guys use? Obviously, I know that you take a lot of pictures, because I know a lot of times, at least from what I've read, that pictures will show up after, well, traditionally after the development stage, but now that we have instant access to our phones, stuff like that. So are cameras also used as a very good evaluation tool as well?
Yeah, we've got a film camera that we use occasionally, but yeah, most of the time we're just using our cell phone cameras. But one thing that we recommend is, if you're going to take pictures, like, always take a few right in a row. Sometimes if you've got the ability to hold down the button, it'll just keep taking pictures until you let go, or you can set it up for a burst where it'll always take 5 pictures or 10 pictures, or even I know at least on the iPhone you got the live setting. So you take a picture, but you can replay back like 2 or 3 seconds, right? And so that will allow you to say, okay, in this one frame, I saw a swoosh of something. The next frame, I didn't. Or the one before it, I didn't. So maybe then whatever is in that one frame is actually there, and not just a random light anomaly in like a single picture that you can't differentiate.
I will say, in 2012, I went to Topeka, and I did a ghost tour with my sister, and this would have been at the asylum, the old cemetery there. And a few of those pictures with orbs are really like intense.
Well, I'll let Tig Lily share a story when we went to Tombstone. We went to the old true Tombstone graveyard, which is actually not even in the city, and we had some interesting things happen. I'll have her share that. But now, also, I would assume you guys use voice recorders too, right? So you'll do.
Absolutely. So that's one of the oldest things for ghost hunting, is just a recorder. So we use a few different digital recorders. You can set these up, ask questions, and it's possible to get voice interactions. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to cover up your beautiful face. You can get some responses to your questions on the digital recorder. Now, early on, they would use just standard reel-to-reel tape recorders. And it actually, how it first started was there was a guy who took a reel-to-reel recorder out into the woods to record bird songs. And when he brought it back in and played back the recording, he actually heard his dead mother's voice on it talking to him. And that was the first ever EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, that was ever recorded. And that's how it became a thing of, oh, we need to check this out, because people from beyond the grave can actually talk to us on these recordings.
And now university actually has a paranormal extension of their campus.
That was from what, Duke University?
I want to see
I think it was Duke.
That's pretty cool. We're going to get to some of the investigations that you guys have done and what results you had. We want to get to a couple more questions here real quick. Here is one from Tig Lily. We already did that one. Let me get down here a little bit. This one. This is an interesting one that leads, both to the faith-based versus that. So she says, do you say a prayer or invoke protection before starting an investigation?
I wouldn't say a prayer, but we have good intentions. Always make our intentions known as like good intentions. I wouldn't put it as a prayer, though.
Yeah, I don't think you necessarily need to, like, I don't think anything is necessarily demonic. So I don't think I need like spiritual protection before I go into it. It's not like they say if you're doing like a Ouija board, you need to open it and then you need to close it. Like, I don't feel like I need to do anything of that.
I kind of agree
for a location, but she's right. Like,
I want to be respectful to who I want to talk to.
Exactly.
Well,
but that's the big thing, is you be respectful when you go into a location, like, and unlike the Zach Bagans of the world that want to yell at ghosts and say, you will talk to me, I'm going to make you mad so that you'll respond. No, if you want to have a good interaction and you want to get good stuff, you want to treat them like I'm going into your house. Am I going to start yelling at you saying, talk to me? Or am I going to sit down and have a conversation? You want to be respectful.
There is a show that some people have seen out there. Oh God, I just blanked on it. But she's a psychic, and she goes in and she does a walk, and then Dead Files, and then the police officer will investigate it. But they're very respectful on how they do that. But that what you said about the Ouija board. Now, being a Catholic, there's certain things that when it comes to demons and stuff like that we're all in set, i.e. exorcism. But with the Ouija board, do you believe, as investigators, that when you start that and you open up that door, are you inviting all spirits in, both good and something maybe not so good?
Okay, so real quick, when was the last time you used the Ouija board?
I've never used one in practice.
I used one once when I was 16. We really don't like have them, but I don't use them, and I don't feel like I want to.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So you guys believe that opens that door?
I kind of do. So, like, if I don't, like, I'm just not going to mess with it.
See, I personally don't think that the nature of the Ouija board is going to bring anything in that anything else you're using as a tool is doing. There's nothing inherent in the Ouija board that's any more of an object than anything else that I'm using. It's just another tool. And there's just a lot of stigma attached to the Ouija board, and most of it is Hollywood induced. These things were used for ages before anybody thought of them as being awful demonic things. And I think
Milton Bradley's the number one producer of Ouija boards also.
So I think it's all Hollywood based, and that's just ingrained in everyone now, that because of that, like, they might not even know why, but they just know it's an evil thing. So a lot of people just shy away from it because of that.
Well, let me ask though, because you're kind of on to another area, because originally it kind of sounded like you're going into areas or rooms or buildings, just kind of curious as to maybe what you can find in relation to feelings or maybe little visions that you might see. And this is more like interacting with what might be there. And so have you done that? Have you felt like you've interacted with something you've felt or seen, or you're more just kind of just curious about, can we back up these feelings we're having? Or
we've had one good evidence of interaction where we were talking to two different dolls. Like, one was a doll, one was a clown. We had cat balls on each of them. And as we were asking questions, it literally went back and forth who was answering. We had a group of about 10 people there.
Oh, wow.
And again, whenever we do cat ball stuff, I am the biggest advocate. I will jump around that whole room trying to make them go off. Just trying to debunk it, because I kind of don't believe. That's why I'm so into it, I guess. But no, the questions that we were able to go for 30 minutes. And then once it stopped, the whole room said, how did it just get so light in here at once? Like, everybody just felt the energy. Or stops to your house, you just feel the energy stop. It was almost like that intense. So that was our.
Really have them set up 2 feet apart from each other, and the room was completely dark. This was probably like 10:30 at night, completely dark. And it took us a while to get there, but it got to the point where we would say, hey, can you go touch the baby? And literally the cat ball in the baby's lap would go off. And then we'd say, okay, now can you go touch the clown? And literally on command, the one that was sitting on the clown would go off. And it was going back and forth for a good 5 minutes.
That's pretty cool.
Doing it. Yeah.
But yeah, like she said, it was really crazy because we had a big group and everyone was like hyped up and excited, and you could feel the energy in the room like you were at a high school basketball gymnasium.
That was,
And then literally we asked something and nothing happened. And everything just stopped, and we could feel the energy go from high to just stale dead air. And and we were leading the group at the time, so I didn't want to say anything to influence anyone else's experience. I just said, did anyone feel anything right now? And like literally everyone said, yeah, the energy in this room just dropped. It just fell out. And I said, that's what I felt too. And then we tried to ask a few more questions for like the next 5 minutes.
Nothing.
No response. So we are sure something was in that room with us, and then it left.
Yep.
That's amazing. Well, speaking about being touched, Tig Lily has a question, and it says, "Have you ever been touched in a strange place? ... like a grocery store."
So she's asking like right, like not a what you consider being haunted, right? I mean,
Yeah, like if you had, you know how like with aliens you've got close encounters of the first, second, third kind. Is there different levels of interaction that you guys have? Like if you are, because you hear about people getting touched, scratched, smacked, beaten, pulled. Have you guys ever experienced anything like that, or what is your philosophy on why is that really happening to people, or again, is it just stuff for TV?
Well, okay, so it didn't happen in a grocery store for me. The one time I did kind of get pulled. It was after my grandfather died. I like grew up with my grandparents and like my aunts and my uncles. Like every summer, we'd spend like 3 months there. So I would always go to my great grandparents' house, no problem, whatever. Walk through the rooms. One time in the middle of the night, about 3 a.m., again the witching hour, I was walking down the hallway and I could just feel somebody there. And then I asked Grandpa, "Is that you?" Yeah, felt my shoulder, the door opened in front of me, and I just fucking ran. Sorry. But that was the only time I've been touched. But I was 12. Did that scare me? Like I could feel them there, but I didn't think that could happen. Oh, that was freaky.
Well, I think there's definitely an endorphin rush, you know, because it's why those people that like roller coasters or haunted houses or stuff like that, it's that rush. But this is an ethical question that comes from P-Beat. I'm trying to get to all these questions. Do you think haunted buildings should be decommissioned? For instance, the old Charleston Jail, built in 1802, stands and houses federal Confederate soldiers and the nation's first female serial killer. So I guess from an ethical question as an investigator, do you think there's some places that should just be left alone? Or
I mean, honestly, we kind of alluded to before, like part of the cool thing about doing these hunts and these investigations is the history of everything. And going to these locations, you know, before you go there, you're going to do a little bit of research on the history of the location. What might have happened there, who lived there, who might have died there, to try to give you a little bit of direction for when you're starting to do your investigation. Now, if you just decommission these locations and board them up and close them off, no one's going to be able to experience that or learn from it. Whereas if you keep it open, yeah, it may be just only the ghost hunters that are going into these locations, but you keep the history alive and you keep the interest in a lot of these historical locations open. And there's been a lot of instances where a location is, you know, kind of falling apart and getting decrepit, but because there's active interest in exploring these, fundraising events are done, and these places get refurbished and restored to like their original glory for other people to enjoy later. So I think the fact that ghost hunting does, you know, keep that history alive is a really good thing for most of these locations.
I want to share real quick. This is that thing that Tig Lily and I witnessed, and we were in Tombstone in the middle of the night. Our video recorder went dead, and then after we left, and we went out there like 1 o'clock in the morning. So from our house, you know, by the time we got there, it was late. But as soon as we left, the video recorder worked fine. So what are your thoughts on why? Is it the electromagnetic energy that causes the batteries to drain or to become discombobulated, and then as soon as you leave that area, they start working again?
That's how they use the energy to actually project any information, or I don't know how to say it.
Yeah, like so we think that ghosts, spirits need to borrow energy from something in order to manifest, in order to interact with us, in order to talk with us. They need energy. So a lot of times we think it's, they're getting energy from our batteries or from our cameras and whatnot. And so we've seen it. We've seen equipment just malfunction for no reason. And we're like, this should be working. I had a full battery and now it's not working. We always bring extra batteries with us for everything that we have. Anything, we always have spare batteries because you never know when something is going to just die on you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and so I'm curious about this question is, do you know anybody that's helped a ghost go to the light? Because this is yet another thing that we haven't talked about, right? Is it a spirit that's kind of caught between worlds? And you hear, I mean, like I said, I don't know much about this, but you hear about, more traumatic deaths where it was a kind of instantaneous thing. And they're kind of caught between worlds and stuff. And that's yet another type of belief, right? And another type of interaction versus what you've been talking about.
Right. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, because I don't know if we believe in it.
Okay. So yeah. So I have not had any personal experience with that. From everything, there's a couple of really good shows that I like on TV. A lot of them are bogus, but one that I really do like is called Kindred Spirits. And they are very, very respectful with the way they investigate, the way they do research, and they don't ever try to get a spirit to pass, to go. They're like, we can't make them do that. But what we can do is try to get them to understand that maybe this is not their home anymore, and it's this person's home, and you can live together and, not be a poltergeist type thing and just live in harmony because it's both your houses. So I don't know if you can make a spirit move on if they don't want to.
Well, do you think, based on that, do you think that some of the spirits may not know that they're in that, for lack of a better term, that purgatory between the living and the light, so to speak? Do you think that there are some that still think that they're there?
So my one experience of when I knew a ghost was kind of stuck was one of my friends committed suicide about 10 years ago and really felt him around the whole time until we actually had the funeral and then could feel like he found his end. But no, and I didn't even think about that until you said, but yeah, it wasn't until then did I really think they didn't know they were there until after the funeral, and then I didn't feel them ever again.
That's interesting. Now, so tell us a little bit about, and those of you in the lounge, please keep putting up your questions. We'll get to them as quick as we can. What type of experiences have you had on your investigations that make you, when you're done, say, wow, that was cool? Or because I'm sure that probably the percentage, because on TV, everybody seems to think with all these shows that it happens like every 5 seconds. I would imagine it's probably 90% boredom and 5% real, things happen.
Exactly. So when you got these shows, what you don't see is they're filming for
like
a week.
Yeah.
And they're making a half an hour show. Well, when you think about all the commercial breaks and the recaps and everything, they're producing 5 minutes worth of actual footage of evidence that they've taken a week to get there. So that's one thing that when you take a group somewhere and you're like, hey, you have to understand that what you see on TV is not reality. We're going to investigate for 2 hours. We may not find anything.
Right.
So the likelihood isn't there for such a short thing compared to what you see on TV. And I'm sorry, what was the heart of that question?
That was saying. So that being the case, though, when you do have that one wow moment, that makes I would assume that makes that whole 2 hours worth it.
Right. So the thing that we described before, like you talk about feeling, that was the one thing that I actually felt. Like I've gotten things on recordings and whatnot, but that evening where we had the cat balls going off and we could feel that energy drop, that was the one thing that I'm like, okay, now I've actually felt. I didn't feel a presence at the time, but I definitely felt that presence leave. Like it was instantaneous and a huge drop. But the one really, really cool piece of evidence that we have, and this was bonkers.
Oh, Belvoir?
Yeah. Belvoir Winery is an old Oddfellows home. And this was a 3 large brick building complex, and 2 of them are in complete disarray, unsafe to be in, falling apart. But the one they've rebuilt into like a reception hall and a bed and breakfast and a winery. And they've converted the top floor into these 8 or 9 bedrooms that you
9
can.
bedrooms.
Is it 9?
Yep. 9.
That you can rent out just like it's a hotel. And then if you're having a wedding there, you know, your partner can stay there and whatnot. But well documented that there's a haunted location. And every single room, they have a guest book where people can write down the experiences that they've had. And we've stayed there probably 3 times now. And the one time we did a really cool thing, and it was mainly with the cat balls and lots of trigger objects. Because
Stuffed animals,
it was an Oddfellows home, it was an orphanage, it was a school, it was an old folks home. So lots of people have come and gone from this place in its over 100-year history. So we set up a bunch of toys because we knew going into it that there's lots of reports of children's spirits. So we were like, okay, that's what we want to connect with, is children's spirits. So we set up the living room area of our room with tons of trigger objects. Dice, cards, cars, lots of dolls, dominoes, just anything that we could think of, and put cat balls on just about everything. And then also had some like tea lights, an LED tea light, so it looks like a little flame, right? So we set up all this stuff. We set it up first at night, and we set up a recorder, and then left the room, a video recorder. So we recorded the scene, left for about 2 hours, came back, watched the footage, and while we were gone, several of those cat balls were going off. And nobody was in the room, nothing was happening, nothing could have set these things off. Then the next morning, we did the same thing, reset everything up a little bit differently. Oddly enough, we had put one of those LED tea lights
right next to the panda bear
in front of a stuffed animal, a really old school panda bear, this one.
This guy.
So this guy we had set up on the floor, and we had a couple instances where the cat balls were going off, but there was a tea light like right in front of this guy. And the tea lights are just kind of designed to like show a little bit of flicker as if it was like a real candle flame. And I'm watching the playback, and this stuffed animal fell over. And I'm like, what the heck? And we had to watch it a few times because it was just sitting here like this. I'm like, how in the world does this fall over? Like, it's leaning forward. Like, you know, you can see that lean. That's how it was on the floor. There's no way. I'm like, I'm trying to think, like, did I like squish the legs, and now like over time the stuffing like pushes itself back? I'm looking at this. I'm like, there's no way that thing happened. I watched it one more time, and I realized that tea light was flickering. It went out, came back on, went out 3 times. And after the 3rd time it went out, that's exactly when that bear fell over. So I really think that something took the energy out of that tea light or borrowed that energy in order to touch the bear and push it over.
Here's an interesting question from Goth GF. Can you describe the feelings you feel when feeling a ghost? No, you don't refer to them as ghosts, right? But I think you get the question.
Ghosts, spirits, whatever.
George?
I mean, generally, you don't walk into a room and say, "Are there any ghosts here?" I mean, I guess I will say, "Are there any spirits here?" But generally, I'm just trying to talk. Like, is there anybody here that wants to talk with me? Like, I'm just kind of throwing it out there. I'm not like necessarily acknowledging, "Hey, I think you're dead, and I want you to talk to me." I'm just like, "Hey, is there anybody in this room that wants to talk? Is there anybody that wants to play with these toys that I brought?" Just kind of just talking in general.
Well,
So,
yeah, because because I would think if you walked into a room and said, "Is there any ghost here?" You get this voice saying, "What the hell are you talking about? What do you mean a ghost? I'm not a ghost. I'm still here."
No, but the question was about the feelings, and I know Amber at the beginning of this conversation, you say that you feel things, and KJ doesn't usually do that. So, what do you feel when you?
So, have you ever been into an old house and it's that musty, dusty, and it almost takes your breath away, hard to breathe? It's like that without the dust. It's just a heavy feeling on yourself, like something else is there. But it's best described as going into an old place where you almost need to cover your mouth because you can't breathe. It's too hard. It's like that.
Or like walking down an alley and thinking that there's eyes on you. That type of
Not
just
like
feeling.
that though. It's not like I'm scared of something watching me. It's I'm into a heavy area. It feels heavy, I guess. Not light. Not like when you go to the top of like Empire State Building. It feels light up there. It just feels like whoosh, light.
like
Yeah.
I mean, almost like the difference between a clear sunny day and like a heavy cloudy foggy day. Just I mean, the difference your body feels between those two things is kind of like what you're feeling, but it's an instantaneous thing of walking into that room and then having that like tenseness, the pressure, just that little bit of difference that's going on in the atmosphere.
But also, it's like the depression. So when I went to the Lent Mansion, I never felt so sad from walking through a doorway at once and then leaving that doorway, not feeling it again.
So part of it is your whatever it is, a feeling changes like that is.
Yeah,
You can, yeah.
Don't know why.
So here's a question from Tigley. Have you ever, with any of your investigations, have you ever felt like anything ever followed you home?
No, as much as we want it to, no. No. So I will say, like, we always take stuff with us. Because some locations already have decorations. Like, if it's a child's bedroom, it's already going to be decorated with dolls, with toys, whatnot. I always want to bring stuff from my house that's new and different, because if I'm trying to interact with a child spirit, I'd be like, hey, look at this toy I brought for you. It's brand new. You've never seen anything like this. Do you want to touch this one? And like the thought is, yeah, maybe sometimes something would come home with us, but we never really felt that. But we did find something at an antique store that recently is very funny.
It says attachments.
We found this box because everybody talks about coming home with an attachment. So we found a box. It's an old sewing box, but it says attachments right on it.
So now wait though, wouldn't that be an opposite? Because again, at the beginning, you kind of talked about energy from something being ingrained in, the soil or the minerals or whatever in a location.
Mm-hmm.
So if it was going to follow you home, then it would no longer be part of where it was, right?
So that's a residual haunting is not going to follow you back. A residual haunting is like a cassette tape. It's that cassette tape is ingrained in that location, and it cannot attach to anything else. It cannot follow you. But it's the intelligent hauntings. It's those beings that maybe they're attached to a location, maybe they're attached to an object, and it's those things that maybe possibly it could reattach to something else. And some people think that they get attachments attached to themselves. I don't know if I really believe that.
I saw that on Aliens. I don't think you want anything to do with that.
No, I think it's demonic if it's like an attachment, to be honest.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. And then also there is one show on TV. I don't know if anybody's seen it. It's a local CBS show, and it's called Ghosts. It's a comedy. But what you said about residual haunting, what you said about residual haunting makes sense, because those ghosts that are there have been there for 500 years in this old castle, but they can't leave the property. That's the one rule, they can't leave. So I guess that would be the closest thing that would be described to a residual haunting. Go ahead, Dave.
No, I just put this up for everybody to read it. It's interesting that P-Beat's talking about the different feelings of energy, that a cemetery can be very dark Well, Gettysburg has more of a significance.
Like an
Powerful
enlightenment,
feeling, I would
yeah.
think.
And a lot of that can just be like your bias, like what you think about a graveyard. So if you think that a graveyard is like going to be a spooky place, that like you could think going into a graveyard in the night is going to be different. But yeah, you walk into a battlefield, you're like, there's history here. It's just a different thought process when you enter a certain property.
I disagree so much.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead. Let's hear your point.
I went the Lent Mansion is a brewery. Like, they had murders, whatever. I've been to Gettysburg, they had murders. But that place has something evil inside it that I've never felt. No, but I've been to Gettysburg to get the significance, and I've been to graveyards. But you go to a place that there's been a mass murder type thing, it does have a different energy to me.
Well, it's funny you mention that because, and unfortunately, Zach and his group went there, but there is a local Halloween place here in Tucson called the Slaughterhouse, and it's very famous. But the Slaughterhouse used to be a meat processing plant, and so how many hundreds of thousands of cattle were killed there, but people actually went goofy. And you can actually take tours there in the off season. And what you're saying, Amber, I agree. You walk in the place and it's like you've walked into a wall of energy, and it's not good energy. You literally, you start feeling creepy in a heartbeat. So I agree with both sides of that argument, that you can get some feelings where you're like, okay, there's something here, but it's happy or it's playful. And then you get some places where they're like, if I can attach myself to you, I'm going to figure out a way to do it. It's that type of stuff. But go ahead.
Oh, I believe that some people bring into their own energy, which can make, like, if we had a group of 30 people go to a place, if you have a whole bunch of like 14-year-old girls that are scared, they're going to create a, like, not a bad energy, but like a scared energy that does kind of go to everyone. It's the same as,
Right.
you go to a baseball game. If everybody's super excited to be there, the energy just radiates. It just happens.
It's almost that riot mentality.
Yeah.
That they start, it's just that feeling. So as we get close to the end of the show, I mean, this has been fascinating to me. Dave, you got any other questions before I post this last thing?
No,
so
go
this
ahead.
came from Matt early on, and we'll go around the horn and we'll start with you, Dave. But basically say, if you were to haunt a location, what would it be and why?
Oh, wow. See, I read that differently. I thought he was asking if we were to go like search a location.
Oh
or
no!
something.
If so, in other words, if you kick the Scotch bottle and you come back and you want to haunt something, where would it be? And
I don't know why. I just thought of like a Walmart or something like that, right? Like people are just begging to be freaked out there. So I would be happy to oblige like all the flip flop folks and all that stuff. I'd be on them like. That's where.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Walmart.
Okay, Amber, you're next. If you could haunt something, what would it be and where and why?
I pick a cruise ship. If I can do a world-long cruise ship, yeah, that's what I'm going to do.
KJ?
Why? Wait.
Yeah,
We
why
need
a
to
cruise
want the
ship?
why of that one. I mean, they got a good buffet, but
Oh, I'm a foodie. That's why, I guess. I don't know if I can do it. Am I allowed to eat
Yeah, but you
food?
can't touch it. It's like, I can't touch it. I can't have any.
Well, can I get like the executive suite of a
that's right.
line? Yeah, who wouldn't want to spend the rest of your life there or not?
All right.
Well, actually, it's funny. A lot of people are choosing to do that instead of going into an old person's home. They're actually going on cruise ships for the rest of their life. Okay, how about you? How about you, KJ? If you could haunt,
So
let's haunt Hombre's
I grew up
barbershop.
in Michigan, and always loved the atmosphere there and the fall colors and everything. And there's a really historical location in northern Michigan. It's right in between the upper and lower peninsulas off the Mackinac Bridge, and that's Mackinac Island. And
Right.
it's an old like colonial fort. And I think that there probably is some spirits and some stuff going on that island, but just because I loved growing up in Michigan and always had fond memories of something like that, that would be a really cool place. But then it just dawned on me that like probably the funnest place would be actually haunt like Disneyland.
No, but I just rolled and then go to the haunt.
Yeah, really. Oh, that one. Yeah. Everybody's going on the ride and they're seeing everybody dancing around, and all of a sudden they see this guy with a mohawk, and this little girl goes, "Mommy, is that ghost supposed to actually be here? All the other people are in Victorian clothing, and this guy's got a mohawk." That would be hilarious. Well, in my case. In my case, believe it or not, it's not. I don't know if you would consider this a haunting, but everybody here knows my love of aviation and my love of World War II. And to me, if I was to come back, I would want to be. And there was two movies about it. One was called A Guy Named Joe, and the other one was called Always. Where Richard Dreyfuss dies as a pilot, and then he comes back, and he's the inspiration for somebody else. So he is a ghost. I mean, he is a spirit. So that probably would be what I'd want to do, because number one, it would get me inside the cockpit of a P-51 and all these other aircraft from World War II. Yeah, I mean, it would just be something that would be so cool. Now, I have to do this, and Dave, I know that she may not like it or not, but our guest of honor today is Panteja, and it is her birthday. So in our own way, everybody, let's sing happy birthday to her.
Oh, sweet Jesus.
On the count of 3, 2, 1. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Panteja. Happy birthday to you.
Yeah, here we go.
And the benefit about all that is more. The benefit about all that is we just did our own ghost investigation. I guarantee you there is not a ghost within 500 miles of any location that we're at right now.
They would have struck you down.
Well, any guys, if you've got anything else in the lounge, please post it now, because we're going to be ending the show pretty quick. Guys, is there anything you want to add from? Because what I think this has done is it's opened people's eyes to. Well, it's opened people's eyes to the fact that a lot of the stuff we see on TV is bunk. You know, is there are some good, there are some bad.
That because there. I mean, if you've watched ghost shows, there's a wide range of shows, from the Ghost Adventures and what they're trying to do with, like, either their scare tactics or their aggressive methods, to more respectful ones. When you're talking about, like, if you want to get into something like this, there's ghost tours going on everywhere. Every state has locations that claim to be haunted, and there's tour groups that will sell you a tour for $100, and you can go have this experience. They'll get all these tools and many more and show you a good time. And that's how we got into this together. Well, the more we got into it, we realized, well, maybe some of the things that they were showing us was not real. They're showing us something is happening on this piece of equipment, and they're telling us that because this piece of equipment is going off, it's 100% a ghost. Or, you know, because we can explain it this way, that means it's real. So there's a definite difference between the entertainment side of it and the realistic, I'm doing research and I'm trying to prove something. And it's the whole genre is definitely geared more towards the entertainment. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you just have to understand that when you're paying for one of these tour groups, most of the time you're paying for an experience for sure, but it's going to be a little bit swayed and maybe not as scientific as you might think it is going into it. You're going to have a good time. You're going to learn some history. You're going to have fun. But is everything that everybody thinks is a ghost real? Maybe not. And definitely the side of just me and her going into a location and doing our own thing and trying to get good, solid evidence, we don't yield very much from one night of investigations. But I can lead a group and I can give them a good time, and I can convince them that there were some ghosts in the room with us, even though there wasn't. Like, so there's two sides to that coin.
Sure. Well, do you guys feel, before we get to P-Beat's question, do you guys feel that since you've started doing this, are you more believers now or less believers now?
Less.
So yeah, definitely.
Really?
She's definitely less. I know for a fact going into these things, and the more we've done, the more she's been like, okay, now I'm less of a believer than I was. Like I
And I've
Why
had
is
certain
what?
experiences, and I still feel like it's why. I don't. I just. I guess I don't know if it's because I'm getting older and I don't feel as much as I used to.
I think a lot of it's just the bias of the equipment and how
And it
people
might
use the
be
equipment.
I've seen people lie, and I debunk everything as soon as somebody says something's real. Like that's my immediate response is like I need to debunk this to know if it's real, and I can
Well,
debunk it when somebody says it.
but that being said, though, with the fact that, like you said, somebody says, "Oh, I saw this and it was this," and you can debunk that pretty quick. So I would imagine that when you do feel or see something, there's no doubt in your mind that it's real.
I guess I
Would
feel
that be
less
would that be
now.
fair?
Yeah, no, that
Well,
is
you
fair.
know,
Well, so that's
then
why it's grown for me, because I didn't really have I believed, but I didn't have a reason to believe early on. And because of like the two specific things, the energy leaving that one room and the one thing that we recorded with this bear, to me, those two things are rock solid. And those experiences to me make me think that there really is something, and that's something further to explore.
Well, let me put Amber on the spot here. So when that occurred with that bear, when it flipped back, being the fact that you like you said, you debunk everything. What was your feeling on that? Was that one of those epiphany moments that said, "Well, yeah, maybe you're right"?
It was, but that also happened 3 years ago. All of my other experiences happened within like a year of each other.
Oh,
and continue.
okay. I see what you're saying. Sure.
So now
okay.
the timeline's kind of like stretching out where it's like, is it really there or was I just in the moment? And again, I'll debunk it for
okay.
myself
Yeah.
in that.
Sure.
No, I
And
will
that's
say
what I was-
that was, what was that, Dave?
Right.
That's what I was going to say is it's kind of, like what KJ mentioned, there's something there and it's maybe that person to decide, I've decided what that is, or maybe you decide there's something there and I don't know what that is, right? Because people, human senses can, kind of, for better term, go off the rails, and people see things differently, hear things differently, just as a matter of course. And just because you can't explain it at that moment doesn't mean it's a ghost. But if you're a believer or you want to, you can say that I can't explain it, and this is what this is what I feel it is.
Well,
But,
and I think,
And that's what I go through when I'm leading a group. If I'm leading a group through an area, like I'm never going to say, "Hey, this piece of equipment went off, so that means there's a ghost here." I'm going to leave the feeling and the interpretation up to the member that paid for that experience.
yeah.
And I'm going to
Well,
show
and,
them,
and of course, those are all people
here's
that
the
are there for that reason, right?
well, but the one thing that we also have to talk about too is the spiritual side of things. Now, granted, I'm coming from a faith-based Catholic upbringing, and
I grew up Catholic.
well, yeah. So that the Vatican has specific priests that's and that's all they do is they take somebody and they exorcise them. Because the thing is, one thing that my wife and I always get in arguments when we're watching some of these shows is they say, "Oh, we're going to bring in an exorcist," and then Jack Bean from Atumwa School of Exorcism shows up when technically there's only one exorcist, and that's something that is from the Catholic Church. So those stories, well, yeah, those stories. When I see those stories, like the possession of Emily Rose, and those from a faith based, and I don't know if that's because the priest just instill it into you. Those freak me the heck out because you see this happening. Yeah, and that's faith based. But yeah, I mean, it's such a wide open subject matter. You could talk for days about the pros, the cons, the faith or religious based spirituality versus the Ghostbuster style, I guess, would be about the best way to look at it. So I think there's room, at least in my opinion, Dave, and you chime in here. I think there's room for all those different beliefs, whether you say, no, it's all electromagnetic energy, it's junk, or yes, there's a spiritual component. But, KJ, like, and I find it fascinating that you were all in Amber, and then as you've gotten older and you've gone through more, you're saying, well, I don't think. And then KJ, you were coming the exact opposite direction. So I think it's a great. Well, I think it's a great dynamic because you literally have the open person being KJ saying, well, I'm open to it, and then you've got Amber, who has been through it, who has felt it, is now saying, well, wait a minute, let's back up a minute. Let's look at this from a scientific standpoint to say it could be this, it could be that. So to me, that's a heck of a team. I mean, really.
It is.
I mean,
and she said the same thing. Like, anytime something happens, you have to try to debunk it. Hands down, if something happens, you can't just say, oh, that's a ghost.
right.
You see something, you have to try to debunk it. You're like, okay, we saw a shadow go across the room. Okay, was there a car driving past the house? Was there this, that, and the other? You always have to try to debunk it. And when you've exhausted everything you can think of, then you go, okay, maybe. This is something.
Well, and that brings up a good point, KJ, because when I was talking earlier about the faith-based stuff, so if you're in there and you got the cat balls and everything else, and they're going off, you can say, okay, this could be this. But if you're in a room next to a bed and somebody leans up and their head goes 360 degrees around, there's a pretty good chance that's real. So I guess that would be the difference between faith-based, because the exorcists are with another person, and this person is, turning their head around like a top.
180. We're gonna get out of the house. We're not gonna see the no.
But no, like you were saying, I do appreciate the fact that she's a bit more skeptical now, because that just leads me to ask more questions. Like when we see the bear tip over, and she's like, "Well," I'm like, "Yeah, but how do you explain that?" Like, because to me that makes me a believer, and I'm like, okay, if you think that it's not, like, give me a good reason for how this happened, like,
sure,
that I can't think of, because I can try to debunk it myself all I want, and I go, no, it's not that, no, it's not that, no, it's not that. Okay, I'm done. Okay, now you tell me what you think could have caused that, and further the discussion, right?
Well, that makes a perfect team when you really think about it. It really does, because then you have the whole thing. We're going to give the last question to P-Beat and then the final comment from Dave. But P-Beat says, have you ever been duped by the phantasmagoria projection effect? I guess this is dating back to the mid-1800s, that is used by Disneyland in the Haunted Mansion. So in other words, a holograph type thing. I'm thinking that's what he means by that, is that you have the ghosts moving around.
Yeah, so we actually just watched a show on the history of the Haunted Mansion ride and everything, and saw exactly how that effect was done. I mean, I've never seen. I want to see something with my own eyes. I think that would be the most amazing thing, to walk into a room and see a presence. I've never seen that. I've never had that happen. So
that's why everyone does.
KJ's just wants to look and say, it's an ugly spud, and then get slimed. I mean, that's really what KJ wants. We know that's the case and stuff like that.
He slimed me.
Yeah. Well, Dave, final comments?
No, I just as every show, I want to thank all the Barflies for hanging out with us, because our show topics are all over the place, and we hope that it brings some interest, at least the conversation, to everybody here. And again, it's the Barflies and the people that join us to participate that really make the show much more interesting. And I know, we've talked watches. KJ's been on with hot sauces, all this stuff. Not everybody is appealed by everything, but I think our conversations are interesting enough that it brings, interest. And so I thank you for Amber and KJ for joining us. Again, it's been very interesting for sure.
Yes, thank you. And just
really appreciate all the questions. It's awesome.
Well, it was really good, and it's a topic that I'm sure we'll have you on again for, because we got to figure out Dave, what's KJ's next hobby that we need to have him on the show for?
Well,
we did hot sauces. We did
spiders and snakes and stuff.
Oh, that's right, spiders and snakes. We got to do that and stuff like that. So anyhow, guys, thank you so much for being. And just a reminder to everybody, don't forget Tuesdays 6 p.m. Pacific. Now that'll be changing. around the 10th of November, and I'll let Dave handle that because we don't change our time in Arizona, so ours will always be at the same time. But again, KJ Amber, thank you so much. We're looking forward to seeing you in Vegas, and make sure, guys, and tell your friends, please get over to Drinks and Dave's. Like, subscribe, comment, and ring that notification bell so we know that our new shows are going to be. And we'll see you on Halloween night. We're not sure what the subject will be, but it'll be something fun. So everybody have a good night. Say good night, Dave.
Night, Dave.
Have a good night, guys.
Later.